Philadelphia Phillies are on the board at the MLB trade deadline, adding Johan Duran in the trade market to beef up their bullpen and make them the World Series contender they desire to be. But Dave Dombrowski is not done quite yet, with still several hours until the full trade deadline is in store, and spoke to the media for the first time, laying out some expectations for the remainder of this deadline search. I do want to dive into some of the notable points for what he made here and what expectations truly should be here, that we should be excited that there has been a move. Johan Durant is a needle mover from the Phillies' perspective, that this bullpen desperately needed that top-end arm, the true closer that he can be in a way that I don't think this roster has had for several years, but the work is not done on the roster overall. That we've talked plenty about the lack of performance coming from the outfield position here, and the Phillies are well aware of that in itself. And so aware, by the way, that Jon Heyman tweets out that the Phillies have on the to-do list a right-handed bat. Bob Nightingale was the first on the prospect price for Durant. So obviously that is something that they are still in the market for, and being pretty transparent about it, to be perfectly honest. And we did get this quote from Dombrowski that I did want to pull up. He was asked about adding a right-handed bat over a left-handed bat, and he said, quote, "I can't say it needs to be, but it's sure a preference." Now, sifting through the rumor mill, there's obviously been plenty of player movement around Major League Baseball. To me, the two most likely names that still remain on the slate, it is Luis Robert Jr., who we obviously just saw in the White Sox series facing the Phillies, as well as Eugenio Suarez down there in Arizona, who took a pretty scary-looking hit by pitch off the hand. The x-rays were negative, which is very thankful there, and I'm sure the Diamondbacks are as well from a trade return perspective, as that would have shook up the market quite a bit. And I also will acknowledge the closer market here. Things got more expensive when Emmanuel Clase is all of a sudden being suspended by Major League Baseball. And it did feel to me like Duran and Clase were kind of the decision points, two of them. I guess you can throw in Mason Miller and a couple other names that were in the mix there. But well done by Dombrowski to get that type of price point for a guy with the supply narrowing down as he began to make deals there. So I've seen a couple complaints about the whole price point, giving up Eduardo Tait there. At the point that I will note here, I am very much in the mode of this team should be cashing the chips to try and win a World Series right now. I understand Eduardo Tait may be a great catcher when his day comes, but Johan Durant is going to pitch 3-4 years at minimum for this Phillies team before that guy even cracks the majors. And at this current point, based on the expectations, based on this current core, the ages of Bryce Harper, Kyle Schwarber, Zack Wheeler, you go down the list of the important players on this team, I'm in on trying to win right now, and I want a World Series just as John Middleton does. So I have no complaints with the price point that they gave up, and I think, in fact, that there should be more credit given to Dombrowski for not having to dig into the Andrew Painters, the Aiden Millers, the Justin Crawfords. None of the key pieces of the youthful farm were given up in that. And I understand Tait is expected to grow into that, but he's not there yet. The dude was born in 2008, that he's got a ways to go before we're talking about having an MLB-type role for him. But nonetheless, doing a shift back to what the expectations are for the priorities from here, and one clear message that was sent, that unless a crazy offer pops to the table here, they seem content with the bullpen arms. And what Dombrowski exactly said there is, quote, between Duran, we've got Robertson coming, and we're pleased with his progress. We have Kirkring from the right side, and Strom and Banks. We feel very comfortable with where we are. Dave Dombrowski said post-game that he isn't looking for more bullpen help. And I will note here that obviously an offer can come to the table that changes that perspective, that if you can get a guy on a discount, but to be perfectly honest, the way the supply and demand is in the reliever market here, that is not something that I see coming to fruition. Now, I'll just throw this out there. This really came through my head as I'm watching the way that the market is transpiring for relievers, that's essentially become the trade deadline. It is what teams are beefing up their bullpen and trading for those type of high leverage arms. I don't understand, if you're a young rebuilding team with little expectation, you should be signing relievers every single offseason, then flipping up the deadline. That's like the easiest way in the world to get free prospects there. So let's tuck that one away, Dave Dombrowski, for when this era of successful Phillies baseball is over and you're looking more towards building for the future. That is a little hack that I would hand out there. But nonetheless, to take a peek at the full bullpen here, it does not look bad on paper, as obviously Johan Duran at the top of that list, and I do think it is very important to note that he is a closer. And to add on to this real quick, they both acknowledged that post-game, Rob Thomson and Dave Dombrowski here. And we know Rob, throughout his tenure as manager of the Phillies here, has been pretty, I guess, not buying into a traditional closer role, that he's been pretty upfront about. He looks at the matchups. He prefers the highest leverage inning, and I've also pushed back on that quite a bit, as my point is always, baseball games are 9 innings. No matter when you use the closer there. That the bottom line is you got to get through 9. And I understand that you can talk about when it is the meat of the lineup or the 3 best players that you want your top high-end reliever here, but there is something about when it is the 9th inning and you got a guy coming in that you know is going to slam that window shut. And for Johan Durant directly here, boy, that intro is going to go absolutely insane in Citizens Bank Park. I hope you all have seen it by now, but between the Undertaker kind of bell chimes there, the little Spanish music getting you fired up, it is going to be electric in Red October, and I do think that this guy is built for it. He does not have a ton of playoff experience, but the numbers are really promising to this point. I believe 18 batters is what he's faced, 6 strikeouts is what he's tallied without any sort of extra base hit here. Some pretty impressive stuff, and that will be the guy that they built for that. I think one of my messages with this bullpen as a whole is they needed that one guy to sort of funnel it all through, and I do think Duran can be that guy. Looking beyond that, Ryan Kirkering and Matt Strahm, the next two names. Two guys that I do have confidence in, that I think have earned the role. I don't think Strahm has been quite as dominant as he was last year, but still a guy that we're nitpicking when saying that. I will note here, it would really aid this team if Jose Alvarado did not get bought for the PED suspensions. If that man was not shoving Ozempic down his forearms and needing to obviously pop hot for the test there, would be a little bit better outlook for this bullpen. But nonetheless, we will get Jose back. I believe August 15th is the date, and have him for the tail end of the regular season. I've seen some speculation of like why even bring him back. I will note here that I absolutely would bring him back, and I would use him a ton. That is a guy that I would just put wear and tear on his arms, and that's still going to be a guy that's a part of the organization moving forward. It's obviously far from ideal that he is suspended and ineligible from a playoff perspective, but when you're talking about resting these important arms for the final stretch of the season, that's when you eat up Alvarado. I wouldn't even mind if there's days where he wants to go 2 innings or try something like that to be safer for the Johan Durans and Orion Kirkerings and Matt Strahm. That's something that I would play with and take it from that mentality, but nonetheless, that is a problem for another day. To continue down with the bullpen, David Robertson. I will say it makes me a bit nervous that we are counting on 40-year-old David Robertson, who is in his 3rd stint with the Phillies. I'm not going to make too much of a determination to this point. I've heard some decent things about how he's looked in the minors in his sort of build-up process, getting ready. We'll see what ultimately happens. I will say for him, that is a guy that I think is probably better that he did not pitch whatsoever for the entirety of the year and now can have that ramp up, that we probably do have a limited shelf life of how many innings are still in that shoulder. And I do appreciate that he basically took the entire season off until one playoff push. And we'll see what he's got. At the minimum, it was a low-risk trade or low-risk move. You did not have to sacrifice any sort of prospects or any sort of players. You just signed him straight up. So if he's got something, he's got something. If he doesn't, it really doesn't hurt you to any extent. Beyond that, Tanner Banks is a guy that I think will be trusted from a playoff perspective, and I think can produce. That he's been really encouraging. Max Lazar, a tough day to be recording on the Max Lazar outlook because he unfolded for about 7 runs. I don't think they all end up going his, but in the 7th inning, absolutely fell apart. The bullpen, him and Seth Johnson were really the biggest culprits there, and I don't think either one of those guys can really be counted on for any sort of high leverage innings, but Lazar has had some really positive flashes, so I know it was a bad performance today. We won't entirely count him out. Jordan Romano, the conversation gets tough for me. Obviously, at the start of the season, this was the player that we looked at as expected to be the guy, the closer, the Johan Duran here, and it has not played out. Now, the quote that did strike some fear into my heart today was this from Rob Thomson post-game saying, quote, "Romano seems like he can be a guy that can come in and finish an inning for you with runners on base." Now, that is a frightening quote, as I do not feel that way whatsoever about Jordan Romano. And I've continued to sell more and more Jordan Romano stock. But he obviously was pretty disastrous at the start of the season. Kind of got to figure it out a little bit. And then I got to the point where I was like, okay, you can tell when this guy has it and when it doesn't. It takes like 3 pitches on the nights where he's completely off, and I'm like, yep, he does not have it tonight. And then there are nights where he looks really competitive. The slider looks really good. He has control there, and he is encouraging. So I kind of took a step back and was like, okay, this guy can be a piece of the bullpen. He just can't be the guy that you're building out to or want to shut down a game. I'm off that island now. I don't know if I can see Jordan Romano pitch in a postseason setting, and I'm pretty frightened by what that might look like. I certainly don't want him to be the get out of a jam type of guy. And I'll note this, keep an eye on this when you watch him from now on. It feels like he's gotten even more like jittery on the mound. Like, believe me, I'm a jump around kind of guy. I can relate to this, but it feels like at the start of the season, there was a bit more like, I don't know if it was confidence or comfortability, but it feels he's extra herky-jerky up there, especially of late. That's something I might have to dive into the film on. But nonetheless, to bring it back to the full bullpen overall, do a couple more notes to name. Jesus Luzardo and Andrew Painter are very interesting here. Now, Luzardo is another guy who was a prized offseason acquisition that we were believing in and has absolutely unwinded of late. It's been really concerning stuff. There's particularly some things out of the stretch that just don't make a lot of sense, and that is concerning me from a bullpen perspective. And then the Andrew Painter conversation, I'm not sure if I see it happening. They've been pretty open about they don't want to use him in a bullpen role, that they want to keep him in a starter's routine. I have a really hard time that as much as I still believe in Andrew Painter as a prospect, I don't see what his role could possibly be on this team this year. Aaron Nola is coming back soon, and I understand we're going to filter Taijuan Walker out of the rotation here. It would not shock me if they even want to come up with some sort of phantom IL stint for Luzardo here, as that is a dude who at the early parts of the season, I was confident. I thought there was going to be a case that could be their game 3 starter from a playoff perspective, but there is no world in which you can pitch him ahead of guys like Christopher Sanchez. Ranger Suarez has to be more important in that. And of course, Zack Wheeler, the ace that he is there. You have your top 3. That has to be the guys, and Aaron Nola is going to be an interesting conversation as well, as he would theoretically bump Ranger Suarez out of that mix here and really be the game 2 starter. We'll see if that ultimately comes together. We have not seen Aaron Nola look like the best version of himself at any point. But nonetheless, you see sort of the bones, the framework of what this pitching staff could be, and now it's time to complete that with a bat. So ultimately to this point, as we have the to-do list, this is the last thing, I do think the Phillies are going to get something done. We've heard that they are the front-runners to land Luis Robert Jr., with the Mets as the other team mentioned in that. Robert Jr. himself put together a pretty compelling audition during this series against the White Sox here. Thought he looked really good, both in the field, on the base path, at the plate. Went 3 for 4 today. He's a guy that looks like maybe could just use a change of scenery, and ultimately he returns to the star player that he has teased to be. When things are fully clicking for him, he's one of the more fun players in all of baseball, but it's been over a calendar year since we've seen that version of him. It feels like to me, sifting through the rumors, reading the reports, that it's either going to be Luis Robert Jr. or Eugenio Suarez from the Diamondbacks there. Those feel like the 2 names that still make a lot of sense, but I will add the asterisk next to it, is Dave Dombrowski can get in his bag here. Let's not forget that when he signed or traded for Austin Hayes, that was not a player on the radar whatsoever. Even this summer, signing Max Kepler, that was not a dude that I saw reported or connected to them in any way, but nonetheless, he ended up in Philadelphia. So we have the pitching staff mostly handled to this point. Still a couple things to figure out as the second half of the season progresses, but now let's find out who that outfield addition is. I don't think it's coincidental that Max Kepler was not in the lineup today. I find it really hard to believe that it is that coincidental that on the day of the trade deadline, or the day before the trade deadline here, that Max Kepler is in the lineup for the 2 o'clock start. The game goes to rain delay, starts at 5:45, and then he's out of the lineup here. That feels like there's something there to me. I don't know if Kepler is out of there. I don't know if this is we're finding a replacement, whatever the case may be. I'll also throw out there some of the worst effort I've ever seen from Nick Castellanos in right field today, and I'm a Nick Castellanos guy. I've been a defender. I'm appreciative for the most part of what he's brought to this franchise. I think he's been completely fine for what expectations are, but was not thrilled with the effort level there today, and that is not something that I expect to be saying about Nick Castellanos. Typically, I feel like he's a guy, he's going to give you whatever he's got. He had more in the tank that he left on there today. But nonetheless, let's see what happens for the next however many hours until 6 o'clock on Thursday. I'm going to be breaking things down from every single angle, and we will be going live right here on Phillies Digest, me and Luke Arcaney, breaking down what this final roster looks like once the deadline does settle. So make sure to tap in for that. The best way by doing so is by hitting that subscribe button there. You can get the notifications at the top. Make sure you're staying in the loop with everything we got going on. We got an exciting second half of the season that I cannot wait to see the action take place on the field. So make sure you're subscribed if you tapped in. Dropping a like on this video. Any comments you have below. We'll be back to talk with you next time right here on Phillies Digest. Peace.